My name is Lassie. I'm 31 years old, and I live in my parents' house, where I work remotely. In this house, I spend my days fulfilling work duties, taking care of household chores, and maintaining order. My family consists of my parents and my brother, who recently got married. When he and his wife, Yana, tied the knot, I thought they lived in harmony, a couple destined for a long and happy life. However, over time, Yana began visiting our home more frequently, spending long hours with us under various pretexts. At first, I attributed this to her desire to be closer to her new family, to settle into her role as a daughter-in-law. I assumed she might be nervous, unsure of how to act, or trying to win my parents' favor. But I never noticed any anxiety or insecurity in her behavior. On the contrary, Yana always appeared relaxed, confident, and friendly. Her charm was almost magnetic, and I couldn't help but admire her beauty. Tall, with symmetrical features and impeccable posture, she practically radiated grace. Her confidence occasionally made me uneasy. Yana acted as if we had been sisters since birth, speaking to me directly and with ease. One day, while sitting in the living room with a cup of tea, she suddenly asked, "Lassie, you don't have a boyfriend, do you? Why not? Don't you want someone by your side?" The question caught me off guard. I felt my cheeks flush, and, trying to hide my embarrassment, I replied that it wasn't entirely true. I was simply too busy with work and rarely met new people. My life revolved around the house, making it difficult to meet anyone. Yana listened attentively and then nodded thoughtfully. "That's true, opportunities are important," she said. "But if the right person came along, you'd want to make an impression, wouldn't you?" Her words left me pondering. I had never considered myself someone who worried about making an impression. My workspace was my fortress, and my appearance on days when I didn't leave the house was far from polished. A soft headband held back my hair, a light moisturizer kept my skin hydrated, and comfortable loungewear ensured practicality. Yana smiled with a warm, friendly grin that was both reassuring and akin to being under scrutiny during a strict exam. "We should start by revisiting your appearance," she suggested, her voice brimming with infectious enthusiasm. "If you want to make changes, we begin with the basics." I wanted to protest, to explain that I always made an effort to look presentable at family events or informal settings, but before I could utter a word, Yana was already standing at my wardrobe. "Let's see what you have here," she said, throwing open the doors. I felt a slight wave of protest rising inside me. This was my wardrobe, my personal space, untouched by anyone but me. Yet Yana moved with such ease and nonchalance that I couldn't muster the strength to stop her. She sifted through hangers of clothes, commenting on my choices. "This is too formal, this is too casual, oh, this is cute but outdated. Lassie, do you even have anything truly modern?" I stayed silent, feeling as if I were on trial, with a verdict delivered without my input. Yana meticulously examined every corner of my wardrobe before turning to me with a confident look and saying, "We'll need to do a revamp. Your style needs a bit of freshness." Her voice carried no hint of judgment, only a genuine desire to help. Even though her bluntness sometimes irritated me, I knew she was motivated by good intentions. Still, I couldn't shake off a slight feeling of resentment. My time at home was my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without worrying about my appearance. "Yana, I understand your desire to help, but why do I need all this?" I finally asked. Her response was simple and sincere. "Because you deserve better, Lassie." Those words struck me deeply. Perhaps I hadn't admitted it openly, but Yana had a way of making everyone feel special. Although I doubted this wardrobe revamp would change my life, I decided to let her continue. I stood in the doorway of my room, watching as Yana enthusiastically sifted through my clothes like a seasoned fashion stylist. I hesitated, uncertain whether to stop her. On one hand, her interference felt intrusive, but on the other, her actions were driven by kind intentions. In the end, I chose to simply observe. My wardrobe was modest but consisted of a carefully curated selection of items chosen to suit my tastes and needs. Clothes from my favorite brand were neatly arranged in the closet. When Yana opened the doors, her face expressed genuine surprise. "Wow, Lassie, I didn't expect you to have such beautiful things," she exclaimed, flipping through the hangers. "And your cosmetics are amazing too. Are those the expensive products I couldn't bring myself to buy?" Yana examined every detail of my wardrobe with enthusiasm before turning her attention to the makeup bag I kept on the shelf near the mirror. Her comments poured out in a continuous stream. "This is incredible. Why do you hardly use any of this?" she continued. I stood to the side, slightly embarrassed by her energy. About an hour later, when the room already resembled the aftermath of a storm, with sweaters, jeans, and previously folded winter clothes scattered everywhere, I decided to intervene. "Yana, maybe that's enough. I think you've seen everything by now." She turned around with an apologetic smile. "Oh, I guess I got a little carried away," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But you know, everything here is really fine. You don't even need to buy anything new. Well, maybe just a couple of new makeup products, if you'd like." I glanced at the scattered items across the room. Of course, I'd have to clean it all up myself, but I chose to remain silent. Instead, I calmly explained, "I pick my products carefully. I have sensitive skin, so it took me a long time to find what works." Yana listened attentively and then nodded. "That's smart. But honestly, you don't leave the house very often, do you?" "No, I rarely wear makeup unless I'm going to an event," I replied. "That needs to change," she declared firmly. "Next time, I'll show you a few simple tricks." Her enthusiasm was infectious, but by that point, I was already starting to feel drained by her energy. Twilight was setting in, and Yana finally prepared to leave. She cast a farewell glance at the closet and said, "We'll revisit this conversation." I nodded silently, escorting her to the door. Her visits had become almost routine, but each time, I couldn't help wondering, why does she spend so much time here? If everything was fine with my brother, why did she come over so often? My parents, on the other hand, welcomed her with open arms. To them, Yana was already part of the family. "Isn't it great that Lassie now has an older sister?" my mom said with a smile during dinner. "Yana even promised to teach you how to do makeup. But Lassie shouldn't rely on her too much," my dad added, nodding in my direction. I stayed silent, offering only a polite smile. Inside, I felt a mix of emotions. Of course, Yana acted with the best intentions, but I hadn't asked her to interfere in my life. My work schedule was busy, and I barely had time for myself, let alone for learning new makeup techniques. Her suggestion seemed both unexpected and intrusive. I was perfectly capable of managing on my own, especially when it came to small things like choosing makeup or clothing. I didn't need anyone guiding me through it. That evening, as I put everything back into the closet, I tried to sort through my thoughts. On one hand, her care was touching. On the other, I was troubled by the idea that her visits might stem from something deeper. Why did she come here? Why did she spend so much time with my family? These questions gnawed at me, but I couldn't find any answers. Yana appeared at our house again a month later, as expected. Her visits had become so regular that I began to see them as an inevitable part of my life. She entered the house with her usual ease, as if she had lived there all her life. My parents, as always, greeted her warmly, while I, hiding my mixed feelings, tried to put on a smile. "Today, I'm giving you a makeup lesson," Yana announced cheerfully, taking off her coat and heading straight for my room. Her enthusiasm hadn't waned, though I would have preferred a quiet day focusing on work. I followed her, holding back sarcastic remarks. Upon entering the room, the first thing Yana did was open my closet. Let's see what we have here, she murmured, as if by now it had become her personal experimental space. I silently watched her sift through hangers of clothes and then grab my makeup bag. The entire process unfolded with such nonchalance that it felt as if my room had ceased to be my personal space long ago. Yana sat on the carpet in the middle of the room, spread out the makeup products in front of her, and gestured for me to sit down next to her. Let's start with a basic makeup look that you can wear every day, she said. I didn't argue. After all, her help might be useful, even if it disrupted my usual routine. Yana explained each step, commenting on which shades suited my skin tone best and how to apply eyeshadow to emphasize my eyes. When she finished, I approached the mirror. The makeup looked beautiful, but it was too much for an ordinary day at home. Thanks, I muttered as I headed to the bathroom to wash it off. While I was in the bathroom, Yana announced that the lesson was over and began getting ready to leave. By the time I returned to the room, she was already standing with her bag in hand. I'm all set, she declared. Did you enjoy it? Yes, thank you, Yana. But before you go, I made some tea and snacks in the living room. Stay for a little while, I suggested. She nodded, placed her bag by the door, and headed to the living room. I watched her leave the room, making sure she was gone, and then went to my computer. Earlier, I had installed a hidden camera in my room. It hadn't been an easy decision. I hesitated for a long time about whether it was the right thing to do, but after my favorite sweater went missing, I felt I needed to protect my space. Opening the software, I began reviewing the footage. The screen showed clips of Yana examining my closet, carefully going through my belongings. Her hands glided over the hangers, occasionally pausing on specific items. She took out one of my t-shirts, inspected it, and then neatly folded it back. But then her attention shifted to my makeup bag. She opened it, sorted through its contents, and, stopping at one of the products, slipped it into her bag. It was my expensive lipstick, one I rarely used because I was saving it for special occasions. I felt indignation bubbling inside me. The recording continued, showing Yana closing her bag and adjusting her clothes before leaving the room. Everything was done with such nonchalance that it would have been easy to overlook without the footage. The rest of the day, I was in a state of confusion. On one hand, I had proof that Yana was taking my things without permission. On the other hand, I didn't want to spark a conflict that could affect my relationship with my brother and parents. I tried to distract myself by staying busy, but the thoughts of what I had seen wouldn't leave me alone. Why was she doing this? What was driving her? I couldn't understand. By the time my parents returned home, Yana was gone. They, as usual, were pleased with her visit, but I decided not to share my suspicions with them. That evening, I sat at my computer for a long time, trying to figure out my next steps. I remained in my room, replaying the footage in my mind. The video clearly showed Yana stealthily putting my belongings into her bag. It wasn't just the act that bothered me, but also what it revealed about her motives. Why was she doing this? Wasn't she satisfied with what she already had? She played the role of a caring sister, but there was clearly something else beneath the surface. I saved the video on my smartphone, not out of spite, but to have evidence in case our conversation reached a deadlock. Then, taking a deep breath, I headed to the living room, where I unexpectedly found my brother. Our parents weren't home, giving me an opportunity to speak openly. "Hey, lassie," he said as he noticed me. "I heard Yana gave you a makeup lesson today. Please stop burdening her so much. Don't you see she feels obligated to help you?" His words stunned me. I froze in the doorway, unsure how to respond. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to say. "I've never asked Yana to help me. Her visits are entirely her own idea." My brother frowned, as though my words annoyed him. "Stop it, lassie. It's your fault she feels the need to come here. You act like a child, and she's just trying to turn you into an adult." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I felt anger rising within me. "Are you serious?" I blurted out. "You're saying I asked her to invade my life, rummage through my things, and give me unsolicited advice?" "You don't understand anything," he interrupted. "Yana says you have expensive clothes and makeup that you don't even use. Where did you get all of that? You don't work, you just sit at home on your computer. You're spending our parents' money on these things and then complaining about how hard your life is." I froze. His accusations weren't just hurtful, they were completely unfounded. "You think I don't work?" I asked, feeling my patience wearing thin. "You've never bothered to ask what I do." "Yes, I work from home, but I earn a stable income that allows me to support myself. I've never asked you or our parents to pay for my expenses." My brother smirked, his gaze growing colder. "Of course, that's what you say. But why are our parents so worried about you? You live here, barely leave the house, and act like you have no responsibilities." His words were like a punch to the gut. I realized this wasn't just his opinion, it was partially influenced by what Yana had been telling him. She had clearly been discussing me behind my back, painting a picture that made me seem helpless and irresponsible. "You only listen to what Yana says," I told him. "But you haven't even bothered to ask me about my life. Everything you know is just her words." "Because what she says makes sense," he retorted. I couldn't continue the conversation any longer. The overwhelming sense of injustice washed over me. How could he so easily believe lies without even trying to find the truth? I turned and walked to my room, fighting back tears. There, surrounded by familiar walls and belongings, I finally allowed myself to feel the pain of knowing that even my brother didn't believe in me. Rewatching the footage, I tried to figure out what to do next. Confronting Yana could destroy not only our relationship but also my connection with my brother. But staying silent meant she would continue her manipulations. I needed to find a way to take back control of my life and prove that I wasn't who they thought I was. When my parents returned home, I felt it was time to act. Everything inside me screamed about the injustice, but I tried to remain calm. Their faces, tired yet kind as always, only made the weight of the conversation I was about to start feel heavier. I got straight to the point. I told them about Mitchell's words, his accusations, and his dismissive attitude. I tried to stay composed, but my voice trembled with suppressed emotions. My parents listened attentively, but their response was far from what I had expected. "Lassie," my father began, stroking his chin thoughtfully, "if Mitchell wants to live here, I don't see anything wrong with it. The house is big, there's enough room for everyone." I blinked, struggling to process his words. My mother chimed in. "Yana really is a wonderful person. She cares about you and Mitchell. I'm sure if we all live together, it'll be fun." Their words hit me like a bolt out of the blue. I couldn't believe my own parents so easily agreed to an idea that wasn't even mine. It was Yana's and Mitchell's. From behind me came Mitchell's triumphant voice. "Well, Lassie. See, you just sit at home while I make money and have a wife. People like you are useless." I turned around and met his disdainful gaze. My heart sank, but I didn't let myself flinch. "I work from home, Mitchell," I replied sharply. "That's still a job, even if you don't understand it." "Oh, working from home," he said, dripping with sarcasm. "That's what people do when they've fallen out of society. A pathetic existence." His words stung deeply. He didn't understand what remote work was, how it functioned, or how common it was in today's world. "Many companies worldwide support remote work," I began, but he cut me off. "Stop justifying yourself. If you can't contribute to the family, then just leave." His words felt like a slap in the face. I looked at my parents, hoping for their support, but they only glanced between me and Mitchell in silence. Neither of them spoke up for me. It all became clear. They didn't want to get involved, or perhaps they even thought I was exaggerating. My brother, with his wife and the promise of future grandchildren, was more important to them. I was boiling inside, but I knew tears wouldn't help here. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you want me to leave, so be it. But I'm taking all the furniture and electronics I bought with me." Mitchell looked startled, but before he could respond, Yana appeared in the doorway, suddenly joining the conversation. "What do you mean?" she asked, feigning surprise. "You don't do anything. How could you afford such expensive furniture and electronics?" Her tone was so dismissive that I felt the last shred of my patience snapping. "I can afford it because I work remotely. And despite your assumptions, I earn enough to support myself." "Really?" Mitchell sneered. "How much do you even make?" "Probably peanuts." "Enough not to rely on you," I shot back, looking him straight in the eyes. My resolve seemed to catch them off guard. Even my parents looked uncomfortable. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to justify myself or prove my worth to them any longer. "Tomorrow, I'll start packing my things," I said, turning to my parents. "Thank you for everything, but it seems it's time for me to move on." I left the living room, leaving them in confusion, and returned to my room. My heart felt heavy, but deep inside, I felt a spark of relief. I knew I was making the right choice. Mitchell immediately turned to our parents as soon as I left the room. His voice was loud. I could hear every word despite trying to focus on packing. "Can you believe it?" he said irritably. "She claims all that furniture and equipment is hers. How could tidy little Lassie afford to pay for all of that?" As always, my parents remained calm. "Well, Mitchell," my father said with a slight smile, "if Lassie really believes that the furniture is hers and she can afford to buy it, then I suppose that's true. And if not, you and I can always buy new furniture." "Yes," my mother added, as if the conversation were of no real importance. "I've even been dreaming about a new massage chair for a while now." "A massage chair?" Mitchell repeated. "What a waste of money." My mother shrugged, a hint of teasing in her voice. "It's just an example, Mitchell. Besides, you earn enough to support us, don't you?" Mitchell looked visibly annoyed. Standing on the stairs, I couldn't help but smile at the scene unfolding below. My parents had always had a light-hearted approach to such matters, preferring to avoid discussing financial difficulties. Perhaps this was why Mitchell believed their financial situation was more stable than it really was. I continued making calls to friends, arranging help for my move. By the next day, everything was ready. Boxes were packed, movers were on site, and transportation was secured. One of my friends owned a small moving company and had kindly agreed to assist with the relocation. As the movers began carrying furniture and equipment out of the house, Mitchell and Yana finally realized I had been serious. Their faces were stunned, their words seemingly caught in their throats. I silently observed their reactions before stepping over to the movers to ensure everything was handled carefully. "You're really taking all of this?" Yana finally broke the silence. "Yes," I replied curtly, avoiding any unnecessary explanation. She seemed poised to add something, but Mitchell interrupted her. "And what are you going to do alone, in an apartment with all that furniture?" he sneered. Unable to suppress a smile, I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm going to create a space where I won't be interrupted while I work." I saw Yana open her mouth to say something, but she stopped short as I continued. "Actually, I'm a writer. My editor, who's been helping me, is here as well." I gestured toward one of my friends, who was assisting the movers. I'd been planning to move out for some time now to create an environment where I can be more productive. And honestly, I'm tired of people entering my room without permission and taking my belongings. These words seemed to hit their mark. Yana looked flustered, her face reddening as she turned away, pretending to find something interesting on the wall. Mitchell was at a loss for words, silently watching as the moving truck slowly drove off with my belongings. A growing sense of liberation welled up inside me. This house had been my sanctuary, but I could no longer stay here, enduring constant pressure and disrespect. Now, I had the chance to start anew, in a space that would belong solely to me. Standing in the center of my now empty room, I felt the weight of tension in every breath. My fingers clenched my smartphone as I replayed the scene I had recorded earlier. Over and over, the footage confirmed my worst fears: Yana, calm and confident, taking things I valued without a shred of shame. I still struggled to believe it, but the proof was undeniable. I thought about how much I wanted to leave this house, this cycle, but I couldn't just yet. I had to wait for several formalities to be settled because I paid taxes on a property I now felt disconnected from. Mitchell and Yana had declared their intent to stay here, which seemed like the inevitable next step in their encroachment on my life. I couldn't afford to simply ignore this development, no matter how much I wanted to avoid confrontation. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I played the video again, looking at the woman who had once seemed like the perfect sister-in-law, the ideal wife for my brother. But with every frame, Yana became something entirely different in my eyes. She was no longer the kind, caring person I had imagined. Abruptly, I stood up, deciding enough was enough. It was time to act. Sitting down on a chair, I dialed my brother's number. My voice was calm, though inside I was boiling. As soon as Mitchell answered, I spoke immediately. "Mitchell, I can't stay silent any longer. I need to show you something." I connected the video to my phone and sent it to him without giving him a chance to respond. A few seconds later, his reply came through. "Are you serious?" His response sounded stunned. I didn't allow myself to hesitate and continued. "Yes, I'm serious. You and Yana decided you'd live in this house, but do you even understand what's happening?" Silence followed. Several long minutes passed, during which I felt my fingers trembling as I gripped the phone. Finally, Mitchell sent another message. "Are you out of your mind? Yana would never do that. She's always been so kind to you." "That's not true, Mitchell," I replied, unable to hide my frustration. I saw it with my own eyes. I recorded her stealing my makeup and clothes. At that moment, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I waited for his response. I couldn't predict what he would do next. His silence was unbearably tense. After a few minutes, another message arrived. "Yana will say it was a mistake. You know how scatterbrained she can be, but I don't think she did it on purpose." I wanted to scream but held myself back. Instead, I turned off my phone and resolved to move forward. Yana couldn't hide behind a facade of innocence any longer. There was too much evidence against her. I walked into the living room, where my parents were sitting in their chairs, chatting calmly as if nothing had happened. But as I entered, something strange flickered in their eyes, as if they sensed the situation was spiraling out of control. Mitchell was sitting nearby, his face tense and eyes glued to his phone. He must have just watched the video. My parents didn't seem to notice, but they looked at me with an unspoken worry. They sat silently, unsure how to react. I took a step forward and, without a word, played the video on the television. Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint sounds from the video as Yana calmly placed my makeup into her bag. When the footage ended, I looked at everyone in the room, my eyes shifting between my brother, his wife, and my parents. My mother, as always, remained calm, but her expression betrayed her confusion. My father sat like a stone statue, not saying a word. "Yana," Mitchell said finally, "is this true? Did you really take her things?" Yana, sitting in the corner, had turned pale. I could see her lips trembling, her eyes avoiding contact with anyone. She was no longer the confident woman she always pretended to be, Her face now reflected pure guilt. My parents remained silent, clearly unsure of how to respond. This was beyond their comprehension, beyond their tranquil way of life. Mitchell spoke again, his voice firmer than before. "Yana, you'll say this is all a misunderstanding, and then we'll forget about it," he declared, his tone sounding like a verdict. I stood there, unable to believe what I was hearing. He was excusing her, refusing to acknowledge the depth of the situation. Mitchell's composed demeanor only added to my frustration. I had long since learned to read his tone, and the cold confidence in his voice now only made me want to escape the situation entirely. I couldn't endure this charade any longer, this game I had been dragged into. But I knew that if I didn't stop now, I could lose everything. "Mitchell, I'm done staying silent," I said, cutting him off. "I know you plan to stay here, but there's something you need to understand. You and Yana are playing a game, and I'm no longer part of it." I paused, watching as his face began to lose the mask of composure he had worn for weeks. "Yana has been taking my things," I continued. "I saw her stealing my cosmetics. You might call it trivial, but I can't live like this. These aren't just objects. They're pieces of me, parts of my life, and you and Yana are destroying them as if I don't matter." There was silence on the other end of the line. Mitchell, usually so confident and calculating, seemed at a loss for words. I could feel his attempts to find the right response crumbling under the weight of the truth in my voice. "Are you recording this?" he asked, trying to regain control. But I knew that even his sharp tone couldn't mask his unease. "Are you serious?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed a button on my screen and played the video. All the footage I had captured now became undeniable evidence. The screen showed Yana, openly and without hesitation, stashing expensive bottles and cosmetics into her bag. The video left no room for doubt. I watched his face change, first confusion, then an attempt to justify it. "You don't understand, lassie. Yana, this isn't what you think. She, just..." His voice faltered, and he fell silent. I could sense the anxiety creeping into his voice. But it wasn't enough. "No, Mitchell, you don't understand," I said with quiet determination. "Yana stopped being the sister-in-law you think she is a long time ago. She's manipulating you, and now she's trying to manipulate me. You can't see it because you're too consumed by her." With those words, I put my phone in my pocket and left the room. My brother remained seated in the living room, stunned and clearly unable to process what was happening. But it wasn't just about him. I headed toward my parents, who still didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. They had always been good people but too naive to recognize what was happening right before their eyes. I stopped at the doorway to their room. "Mom, Dad," I said, "it's time we had a talk. I want to sell this house." They turned to me, but what I saw in their eyes wasn't confusion, it was hesitation. They didn't seem ready for this news. My mother wiped her eyes, and noticing how she leaned towards siding with Yana, I felt a surge of anger rise within me. "Are you serious?" my mom asked. "Can't you just leave things as they are?" "No," I said firmly. "I can't. This house is no longer my home. And Yana won't live here anymore. I'm leaving." I walked out of their room without waiting for a response. There was no point in staying in a place that had long ceased to feel like mine. The house I once considered a haven had become an arena for games, manipulation, and theft. I couldn't be part of this story any longer. The moment I stepped through the doorway, deciding to leave, I knew everything had changed for me. This wasn't just a physical departure, it was a step into a new life. I wasn't going back to the old ways. I was leaving behind not just the house, but also the relationships that had suffocated me. Though uncertainty lay ahead, I felt that my journey was just beginning. I wouldn't wait for others to give me what they couldn't. I would become the author of my own life. And neither Yana nor Mitchell would stop me anymore.